Good evening. We live in exciting times. Two very important probes have been launched, Planck and Herschel. We'll talk about those in a few minutes. But first of all, we're going to discuss galaxies. And I'm joined now by Professor Gerry Gilmore from Cambridge University, one of our regular and welcome visitors, and by Jenny Richardson from the University of Edinburgh, and of course with Chris Brentold. Well, now, we're talking about galaxies. I think almost everybody knows what a galaxy is, but maybe just some people who don't. So let's go back to basics. Give us a rundown. What is a galaxy?
Well, galaxies are both very simple and very complicated. They're made of essentially two different sorts of stars, young stars and old stars, which are distributed in different ways. The young stars tend to be formed in a flat disk, like the disk of the Milky Way, and the old stars tend to be in a much rounder, more spread out structure. But the most interesting thing about galaxies is the other bit that you can't see, which is the dark matter that holds them all together. So what galaxies really are is a very large number of stars, quite a lot of which probably have planets around them, distributed in two different shapes, and we don't know why, and we want to understand why, and all held together by the dark matter, which itself is distributed probably in a very big, rather round distribution, and we don't really know why about that either.
We, of course, are in the middle of a galaxy, and we see that as a Milky Way.
We do. You see the distribution of stars on the sky, and it took an awful lot of work by astronomers to try and work out what structure the Milky Way actually is. But we have a pretty good idea now, don't we, Jenny?
That's right. You see, the difficult thing about looking at the Milky Way is because we're inside the disk, it's very hard to get a global image of it. But in the local group of galaxies, there's another galaxy called Andromeda, or M31. That's very similar to the Milky Way. It's also a disk galaxy, about the same size, but because it's further away on the sky, we can see a global image of it. So we can use that.
What's the main differences between a spiral and a typical elliptical, Jim?
Well, when you look at spiral galaxies in the sky, they're very pretty. They have a disk with these spiral arms, and that's embedded in a spherical halo of stars. But elliptical galaxies tend to be much bigger than spiral galaxies, and they don't have this disk feature. They're just a smooth distribution, a spherical or elliptical distribution of stars. And because they don't have these spiral density waves causing star formation, they tend to be older stars and redder in colour.
These things are a long way away, and their distances are measured in light years, and light moves along at 186,000 miles a second. In 1 year, it goes nearly 6 million miles, and that's a light year. Now, the Andromeda Galaxy is 2.5 million light years away.
The precise distance, of course, doesn't mean very much because it's a big thing. So you've got to say, well, distance to what? Usual sort of astronomer dodging questions. You know what we're like, don't you? We'll never give you a straight answer for anything, Patrick. But that's about right. That's about the distance between the centre of the Milky Way and the centre of the Andromeda Nebula. And our little local group of galaxies contains two big, two medium-sized, and rather a lot, hundreds of little tiny things. And the whole thing's about maybe 2 or 3 or 4 million light years across. And we're pretty typical of the way the universe is built up. It's made up of these little blocks with a small number of biggish galaxies and a lot of small galaxies in a little clump somewhere.
Jerry, what is a spiral arm, and how do they evolve?
Well, the first thing to realise is what a spiral arm is not. It's not a solid thing. It's not like the line of soldiers or the spoke on a bicycle rotating around. What it is a change in the speeds of the stars. And in fact, the best possible example is what happens with traffic on a motorway. It's exactly like what happens on a traffic on a motorway. So you get a line of cars travelling along perfectly innocently. There's a cute one. And for no particular reason at all, some of the ones at the front slow down a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then the ones behind them slow down a little bit, the ones behind them slow down more, and so on.
So this is the M25 on a Friday night.
And at the other end of the traffic, you've got a clear space. And so the stars, or the gas clouds or whatever, tend to pile up. And when they're close together like this, if they're clouds of gas and stars and so on, the gas clouds will crash together. They'll form new stars. They'll get very bright and they'll be very visible. And so as well as having more stars and more gas clouds in the middle of your traffic jam, you get all this new extra stuff, and it really is very, very obvious indeed. Actually, there isn't that much more than there is at the front. And so the stars at the front will slowly move away and spread out.
Yeah, we can move those off.
Whereas the ones at the back, you'll get ones going too fast that pile up again. And then all of a sudden, these stars have gone, and you've got your spiral arm still here, except it's now in these stars. And so the spiral arm itself has moved itself back around through this line of cars, and there's still a spiral arm, but it has different stars and different gas clouds in it.
We've been talking about galaxies in the Milky Way, so let's have a look. Pete Lawrence is in my garden, so let's join him there and see what he has to show us.
The Milky Way is our own galaxy, and it can be seen in the night sky all year round. But there are certain times of the year when the view is better than others. Now, the summer is just one of those times, and there is a pattern of stars in the summer night sky which can help us to locate it. Now, this pattern, called the summer triangle, is pretty prominent in the summer night sky, and we've got a low-light video camera set up over here to help us find it. Now, the summer triangle is actually quite easy to find in the summer night sky. If you go out any night in June and look towards the east or the southeast, then high up in the sky is a steely blue star, which is known as Vega. This is the brightest star in the constellation of Lyra the Lyre, and you know if you've got the right star because just underneath it there is a small diamond pattern of stars, fainter stars, which identify the constellation. Now, if you've located Vega, come down from Vega and you come to the star which marks the bottom of the summer triangle. This is Altair, the brightest star in the constellation of Aquila the Eagle. You know if you've got Altair correctly because there are two fainter stars either side of it. Now, the last star in the summer triangle, the upper left star, if you like, is Deneb, and that's the brightest star in the constellation of Cygnus the Swan. Now, astronomers recognise a pattern within Cygnus which they call the Northern Cross, and Deneb sits right at the very top of the Northern Cross. Now, at the time we're looking at it here, the cross is actually on its side, but it's quite distinctive. If you look to the right of Deneb at the moment, you can see a fainter star which is the centre of the Northern Cross. Carry on along that line, for a little distance along, you come to another faint star at the base of the Northern Cross, which is Albario, and that's a rather nice double star to look at with a telescope. Now, the Milky Way runs right the way down the spine of the Northern Cross. It then flows down into Aquila the Eagle and then carries on going, ending up in the constellation of Sagittarius. If you can see the Milky Way in this direction, you're looking into the very heart of our Milky Way galaxy.
Well, thank you, Pete, for acting as our guide. Now, back to galaxies. I know you've been making a close study of the Andromeda Galaxy, which is the only one from here you can really see clearly with the naked eye. What are the main differences between Andromeda Galaxy and our Milky Way?
Well, it appears that the Andromeda Galaxy has had a more active merger history than the Milky Way. And what that means is that during its lifetime, it swallowed more dwarf galaxies. It's eaten them up and accreted them onto itself. And although both galaxies seem to have formed this way, when we look at Andromeda at the moment, we see a giant stream of stars which is falling into the galaxy from behind. And this is because the Andromeda Galaxy is eating up quite a big galaxy at the moment. And as this galaxy falls in, stars are stripped off from it and distributed around M31.
And these are streams of stars that you're
That's
talking
right,
about.
that's right. A galaxy has fallen into M31 and it's been tidally disrupted. And
Or ripped apart,
ripped
right?
apart, eaten, cannibalised, yeah. And it leaves a trail of stars behind it. And the exciting thing is that this galaxy passed extremely close to the very centre of M31, and then it continued to orbit around. And as it was doing so, more and more stars were stripped from it. So around the centre of M31 now, there are great clouds and fan shapes of stars which have been torn off from that galaxy and distributed around M31.
Now, what about these much smaller ones? We have dwarfed galaxies, and I gather you found some now that really are dwarfs.
Well, yes. With a new survey, the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, the same thing that Chris uses for his famous Galaxy Zoo project, we've done something much more interesting. We've taken all those galaxies away and we've given them to the zoo, and we say, well, what's left? And so we've taken all the animals out of the zoo and we just look at what's left. And what's left is, of course, all the Milky Way. It's the stars all around the sky. And in there, we can find little tiny galaxies. And the smallest of them now have literally only a few hundred stars in them. So we've got something the size of a small star cluster that you can see by eye, like the size of the Pleiades. And yet it's an entire galaxy in its own right. So it's got as many stars in it as the Pleiades, but it weighs tens of millions of times more. Because what it really is a big dark matter blob.
I mean, there's an awful lot of dark matter in the universe. So what do we know about it, Chris?
Well, very little. All we know is that it interacts with the rest of the universe via gravity. Gerry, is that fair? What else can we say?
That's correct. We know nothing about it except that it's transparent and that it makes up most of the weight in the universe. There's maybe 5 times more of this stuff in the universe than the stuff we're made of, and it's incredibly transparent. Actually, we're rather lucky it's transparent, because otherwise we couldn't see very much of the universe, because there's such a lot of it out there. And one of the great mysteries is, what is this stuff?
There is a third rather nice spiral in our local group, and that's the M33, the triangular spiral.
It's been rather left out, has it? What do we know about M33, Jenny?
So M33, as Patrick said, is also a spiral galaxy, but it's a dwarf spiral. It's much smaller than both Andromeda and the Milky Way. And it looks like it's a satellite companion of M31, which means that it orbits M31.
Does it?
Yes, we think so.
That's the new result,
Controversial.
right? Because the M33's been thought of in the past as being an isolated and rather lonely thing.
That's right. It didn't have any tidal streams, for example. It looked very calm and unaltered. But as we look deeper and deeper into M33, we're beginning to see now that there are signs of tidal interactions. So we're seeing streams of stars and so on. It indicates that it's been tidally disrupted.
Well, there's a great deal to be learned. Jenny, thank you very much. Well, we talked about the launch of the Planck and Herschel probes. They went up from French Guiana. Must be most impressive, and Chris was there.
The spaceport here in Kourou has been home to the European Space Agency's launches for the last 30 years. In all of that time, there can rarely have been a launch as complex or as critical as this one, which will carry Herschel and Planck into orbit. It's exciting and a little nerve-wracking to be this close to the launch, watching it head for the pad. What it must feel like for scientists who've spent 20 years of their lives building those satellites, I can't even imagine. I know you've worked on Herschel for more than 20 years. Watching it head out to the launch pad this morning, how do you feel?
It's actually a very funny feeling. I mean, it's like the kids leaving home. You know they go, but you don't realize up to the point they're gone. And for the kids, you see them back after some time. Herschel Planck we will never see back.
Are you nervous about the launch?
Yes, sure. I'm nervous, not really, but excited, because it's something you do once in your life. I mean, it's something you will never do again, and therefore excited, yes.
Planck and Herschel are among the most complicated spacecraft that ESA has ever built. They may be travelling into space together, but they have very different missions. What's Herschel's main mission?
Its main mission is to study the infrared universe. In fact, the far infrared universe that verges on the sub-millimeter universe. What this means is it studies the matter between the stars, which is cold. And this is the matter from which we make new stars, new planets. And we do that in our own galaxy, but also in galaxies far away from us. And in this way, we study how stars were formed throughout cosmic history.
So you see galaxies forming as well as individual stars?
Yeah, in a way, yes.
So Planck's mission is to study the cosmic microwave background, the CMB. What on earth is it?
The cosmic microwave background, the CMB, is light, photons like that we call them, that last interacted with anything in the universe about 300,000 or 400,000 years after the Big Bang. The early universe, when it was hot and denser than it is today, was opaque to photons, to light. And then all of a sudden, at this time, about 400,000 or 300,000 years after the Big Bang, the universe went from being opaque to being transparent. So all of these photons that had been trapped all of a sudden got freed. This is just like looking at the surface of a cloud. The photons are bouncing around inside the cloud, and then eventually they get freed. And so by looking at the surface of the CMB, it's like looking at the surface of a cloud. And you can see the structure of a cloud just like you can see the structure of the microwave background.
Well, with so much work gone into it already, I have to say you seem very calm for a man who's watching the last 20 years sit on top of a rocket. How are you feeling?
Well, you know, when you strap yourself into a roller coaster, there's no need to worry, because you know that the people who designed it and the people who operate it are experts at that kind of thing. So I'm putting my trust in the real rocket scientists who've put this system together.
We're literally a couple of minutes away now. The final preparations you can hear in the background being broadcast from the Launch Control Centre down behind me. The final checks have been done, and so far it's been a flawless countdown. Having never seen one of these before, I'm sort of in awe of what we might feel and hear up here. We'll just have to wait and see how it turns out. Fingers crossed.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Allumage Vulcain, allumage des EAP et décollage.
Look at that. It's almost too bright to look at. That was spectacular. We're on our way. Everything seems fine so far. We're waiting for the solid rocket ejection a couple of minutes in. It's an unbelievable sight reaching up from the launch pad. I think that's the solid rocket ejection. Something going on. There they go. That's the boosters gone. Well, there they go. 20 years of hard work, and Herschel and Planck are now on their way into space. So, how does it feel?
Wow. Wow. Oh, that was really good. I really enjoyed it. I decided to watch it rather than film it or photograph it. And it went off on the dot. You know, the flames were spectacularly bright. A very impressive rumble.
24.5 minutes after launch, the rocket stops. 26 minutes after launch, Herschel separates. 28 minutes after launch, Planck separates.
You're a step closer to that champagne.
38 minutes after launch, signal acquisition for Herschel, and 39 minutes after launch, signal acquisition for Planck. And I think at that point, the champagne bottles are gonna appear.
And that's it. Herschel's on its way, Planck's on its way. The Ariane 5 has done its job absolutely flawlessly. It's a stunning end to a successful launch, and there are some very, very relieved scientists around here.
Well, it must have been a great moment. I wish I'd been there. I imagine you were very relieved to see the liftoff go well.
I was, but not as relieved as the scientists were. It was an amazing sight seeing it lift off and head into space like that. And everything's gone well. Everything went well on the day. They lifted off just on time, as you saw. And everything's gone well since. Both Planck and Herschel are on their way to their final orbits. They're cooling down. The instrument startup has happened. And as far as we know, everything is absolutely perfect on both spacecraft.
Well, that is great. Now, on to our other news notes, Chris, and we must obviously begin with the repair to the Hubble Space Telescope.
Yes, it has been an amazing few weeks for any astronomer because we had Herschel and Planck launch, and Hubble is now in the best shape it's ever been. The astronauts on board Atlantis visited it, carried out a series of spacewalks, which did a whole series of things. Firstly, most importantly, they replaced Hubble's gyroscopes. These are the things which Hubble uses to point around the sky. Without them, it can do nothing. It now has a full working set. The astronauts added 2 new instruments, the Cosmic Origin Spectrograph that's going to look at galaxies in the early universe, and also the Wide Field and Planetary Camera number 3. We've picked 3, which will give us amazing views of pretty much everything in the nearby universe. And then my personal favourite, they fixed an old instrument, STIS, which is an ultraviolet spectrograph. The crucial thing here was they had to replace a part from inside the instrument that was never meant to be replaced in space. It involved undoing 120 little screws. They managed to do that perfectly, and as far as we can tell, we're still waiting for the first images, but everything worked brilliantly.
Well, time will tell. Chris, thank you very much. Now, next month, obviously, we're devoting it entirely to the anniversary of the first landing on the moon, and how long ago that seems. So until then, good night.